A warm welcome to Lost for Words, a podcast exploring the opinions, glories, and most interesting stories of guests. I am your host Jason, and this is episode 8. Episode 8 takes us to the somewhat unremarkable city of Fargo in North Dakota. However, I can assure you today's guest is anything but unremarkable. To put it plainly, Reid Messerschmidt is an alcoholic, and he joins me today on Lost for Words to chat about his fateful story with liquor and the process he has undertaken to get himself back to the comfortable place in which his life exists today. Reid speaks extremely bluntly about the dark places in which he found himself and fully acknowledges the mistakes he made in the past. However, he does this with a humorous edge, and he's a delight to listen to. This is really a good one, and I will speak to you on the other side. A quick housekeeping note before we get started. Please leave a rating or a review wherever you get your podcasts, whether that be Apple, Google, Spotify, Podbean, or any other platform. It's the best way the podcast can grow and better content can be produced for you, the listener. It's your listening experience that matters the most. But enough from me, now on to today's episode of Lost for Words. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, good. I can hear you okay. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad. How's your day been?
Oh, I've been working. I'm still working. I'm on the clock right now. So, it's been all right.
Good. Right, will we get started then?
Yeah, sure. Sounds great.
Go for it. So you said you're from Fargo in North Dakota. Is that where you grew up as well?
Yeah. I was born in Fargo, North Dakota, grew up in Fargo, North Dakota. I moved to California for a bit, in my 20s, but ended up back here.
And how would you describe your own childhood?
It was pretty good. My parents didn't like each other much. I don't think that's uncommon. They were very incompatible. And that was difficult sometimes, but I think overall it was pretty good. We'd always had, nice house and food and everything we needed.
Brilliant. And what would you say you were like as a child? What were you into? What were you not into?
I think I was a very bookish young man, a chubby little book reader. I just like to read all the time. That is 100% what I did. That and watch like VH1 music videos and whatever. Yeah, it hasn't changed much, honestly. Slightly less chubby.
And was that through elementary school and high school?
Yeah, sort of. No, by high school I was not chubby and more gregarious, I would say. So that's good. I shaped up in time.
If you think of yourself now, is there anything like from that time that you think could have predicted the way you are now, or have you constantly been evolving as you've grown older?
I certainly tried to evolve, but there's definitely a through line of me that doesn't change. Yeah, I'm essentially the same person, I think, in various ways, just have added layers, I think. But yeah, I still love books, still love music. And yeah, I mean, life has changed, but life changes, but you're always going to be, I think, at the core, like who you are.
Very true. So then we'll go from there on to the reason we're on today. So we frame it as alcoholism?
Yeah, I am an alcoholic. Yeah, I'm part of that club.
What was your first ever experience with alcohol?
The first ever, I remember it exactly. It was, my parents had like all these bottles of, dusty old bottles of alcohol, like in the top of the closet. They hardly ever drank. Not really. I think I saw my dad drunk twice and never my mother. And just like getting up on a stool and like pouring a little bit from each into like a thermos, so there'd be like a little schnapps, a little rum, a little whiskey, a little vodka, just a little of everything into a thermos. And then I'd drink that, thermos when I went and did stuff with my friends. It's very disgusting. Don't mix those things together. It's poison basically. But that was the first time I ever drank, was that way.
How old were you?
16, I would guess. Something like 16.
Is that, so here in the UK, our drinking age is 18. So
yeah.
So if your drinking age is 21, is 5 years before legal age, would that be considered very early?
I think it's sort of typical. North Dakota is heavy drinking is kind of the norm around here. So it's probably more typical. I don't know what it's like where you are. You're in Scotland, right?
Yeah.
Is there a big drinking culture?
There's a massive drinking culture, but I would say
I assume
that probably starts at, well, for me, I was 14.
Yeah.
And that's only 4 years before the legal age. But I think pretty much most people have definitely by the time they're 16 here.
Sure. Everything I know about Scotland, I know from an Arab Strap song. So yeah, I assume there was a lot of drinking.
No, so as soon as you started drinking, were you addicted?
No, not at all. I was more of a pot smoker. I like marijuana much more at the time. I don't know why, because marijuana just made me want to like be quiet and listen to music. And what I wanted in life was to be outgoing and popular with girls. That was the essential goal, right? So smoking pot was not conducive to that at all, No,
because even when you see like in the typical American high school films and stuff, that's the stoners are kind of in the corner, away from said girls and said cool people.
It's not exactly that way. I mean, everybody smoked pot, like a little bit at least, So like the popular kids, the guys anyway. I'm not sure how much the girls were smoking pot. Some of them were, obviously. But yeah, everybody was smoking pot. Terrible pot. Just the worst.
So how old is this then in terms of age are we at here? So 16, 17 still?
16, 17, 18. I quit pot. I quit smoking weed when I was 18 because I got arrested. And it was time for possession. Nothing huge, but it was enough to make me quit.
And in North Dakota, did the law come down hard on that type of thing?
Yeah, like ridiculous. Yeah, we got handcuffed and put in the back of a car, driven to prison, put in a holding cell. Had to have like a whole trial. I had to have a trial for small possession.
Trial?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's not like I had like a lawyer and they were making arguments, but I had to go in front of a judge. And,
that sounds very small town.
It's we are a small town in a lot of ways.
So then, what age would you say you started to notice that you were developing into being an alcoholic?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say exactly. I think I always sort of knew. I drank a little different than everybody else. At least by the time I was like 22. Like I said, North Dakota culture is very drunk. It's a drunk culture. And the drink that everybody drinks is Windsor Canadian whiskey.
Right.
Which is it's whiskey. It's just a big jug of cheap whiskey. So that's what we drank all the time. So, 4 of us would buy a bottle of Windsor and, you'd sit around a table with a shot glass and you'd pass the shot glass around and you'd take a shot when it was your turn and people would tell you to hurry up if you were taking too long and you'd finish, you'd drink until it was gone.
Yeah.
And so that's what me and my friends did. I mean, we just drank whiskey all the time, which is, everybody blacked out at some point and everybody developed unhealthy habits.
But would you say you were noticeably worse than your friends?
I don't think they would have noticed that I was worse. But what was different was that I started to drink alone.
Right.
At some point when I was like 24. And that is when it really became a problem.
So see, up to that point, in terms of if you're late teens, early 20s,
yeah,
how did it affect, were you working at the time? Did it affect that in any way?
Yeah, I was going to school and working, all the normal stuff. I don't know that it affected it all that much. I got good grades. I held a job for a long time. I worked in a grocery store, so I could get away with just about anything.
Sure.
And we had, our lives were pretty nuts. Like, I lived in a house with all my friends, various houses with my friends, and the first one we had was just out of control. We got evicted after 6 or 7 months, and we deserved it in every possible way. There was meth being sold out of the basement. There was blood on the walls. It was a mess, and we ultimately got evicted because a guy got beat up so bad in our boulevard that he had to like have his jaw wired shut. And this wasn't by me or any of my friends, but it happened in our house. One time a detective came to our house and had to take one of our rugs for evidence.
Just the rug?
Yeah, he had to take a rug for evidence. Yeah, so yeah, it was wild. It was wild times. Bad things could have happened. Worse things could have happened. But they didn't. It was fun. It was a good time.
How long were you able to mask your problem from other people?
That's a really good question. I throughout all my 20s, I think, basically. When I was like 29, I had just gotten a new job. I decided that I, needed to make some changes, that I was going to kill myself drinking this way and living the way I was. So I got in this like an adult-ish job. And one weekend, things got a little out of control, and 2-day weekend turned into 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 days. And eventually, my parents started texting and getting more and more frantic. And eventually they were knocking on my windows in my apartment, which was horrifying. And I had to, kind of fess up a bit then and kind of really address the fact that I needed to change my ways, but I wasn't in any way ready to call myself an alcoholic or quit drinking. That was just the kind of the start of like, people are starting to notice kind of thing.
So in terms of you knowing yourself that you're an alcoholic, how bad did it get in terms of, so I've split this into like 3 aspects. So how bad did it get you, firstly, financially?
Financially, I have always been very fiscally irresponsible.
Right.
I just don't think about money at all. I ended up marrying an accountant, so it all turned out
that probably helps.
Yeah, it's great. Highly recommended. So yeah, I had student loan debt that I wasn't paying, American stuff like medical bills and student loans. I didn't have any money, but I still managed to go to the bars all the time. It was fine. I didn't feel like I never had to worry that I wasn't going to eat or anything.
Then part 2 of that, how bad did things get physically? Like, did you do your body any harm?
I'm sure I did. I'm sure there's some kind of lasting effect. I'm sure if I hadn't quit when I did, there would have been some serious consequences. And I had terrible anxiety all the time when I wasn't drinking, and alcohol really antagonizes anxiety. It's kind of like a loop, you feel anxious, so you drink, and then you feel anxious because you drink kind of thing.
the part of that, the next part was going to be mentally. So you were saying that, I've heard that quite a lot, and I know people that are alcoholics and have recovered as well. So it can be said quite a lot that the hangover is worse for your mental health than the actual drinking itself.
Yeah, it's bad. I mean, it's just like bottomless depression, and like you just feel guilty about it. I think there's a lot of guilt involved in the hangover, that's not involved in most people's hangovers, probably. Yeah, the hangovers are bad. They're really bad.
And how did not even just going a bit deeper in the hangovers, what were the other longer lasting mental effects of being an alcoholic?
Well, I don't know if it's because of, but depression and anxiety, I think I had it all along, just undiagnosed. Right. And I was sort of, coping with those through alcohol, and didn't have the, genetic capability, to quit or do it, an appropriate amount. I think alcoholics that have gotten sober are advantaged. It's like, it feels like a good club to be in. Like, I have a lot of perspective and appreciation for just regular things. I just assumed that I was going to die pretty early. That was just a constant like thought in the back of my head. Like, well, you're just going to die and then whatever, not your problem anymore. So just like not being dead is kind of a shock. And not being dead and having like a really good life, is an unbelievable. I mean, I just couldn't have even conceived of it. So I think like the long-term mental effects were actually positive. I feel like I came out the other side of it a better person for having been through it. There's this comedian that says, I don't trust anyone that hasn't lost control of their lives for a decade or so. And I do feel like that's true.
And in talking about relationships, was your drinking, did it cause any friction in, could be a single relationship? Have you been with the one person the full time, or any multiple partners?
Yeah, it was multiple people, and yeah, totally. I mean, I had one long-term relationship in there, and it definitely negatively affected it. But yeah, I mean, shorter relationships, it was 100% just like me choosing drinking over a human being, most of the time, anyway. And then, with my wife, it absolutely affected our relationship at the beginning. I don't think we'd still be married if we definitely wouldn't still be married if I was still drinking. She made that very clear. And yeah, I almost tanked our relationship like right away, like right after our marriage. But luckily I didn't.
So going back to before your wife, obviously your wife being your wife was the relationship that lasted. If you go back to thinking about one that didn't last, how would a conversation go where you choose drink over a person? How does that play out?
I mean, that's never said. Alcoholics are liars.
Yeah, that's what, like, I know it wouldn't be said. So how would you, what is your formulating in your head?
You would say, it's obviously it's not working out. I think we both know it's not working out. And they would think to themselves, yeah, you're a fucking asshole. I'm sorry if I shouldn't swear on this thing.
No, you can swear.
Okay. Yeah, they'd say, yeah, of course it's not working out because you're an asshole and you're drunk all the time. So they'd be like, yep, okay, fair enough. It wasn't ever like a shock to anybody that I was discontinuing. There was one girl who was, for some reason, was really into me. And I, in the middle of the night, she was sleeping in my bed and we'd gone out and I was drunk, obviously. And, it was like 2 a.m. and I shook her awake. Like I woke her up and then broke up with her. Like in the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night? Oh my God.
It was, yeah, I feel bad about that one. It's not, there's no good way to do that. You can't do it. Don't do it.
So did you let her go back to sleep after, or did she just go?
I told her she should stay and go back to sleep, and she was like, "What are you even talking about?" Yeah, she left. Um, yeah, that was a bad choice on my part.
Then with your wife, what was the conversation? What was her ultimatum? How did she frame that conversation with you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's sort of a longish story. Like, we got together and I quit drinking alone because we were together all the time, but still like I was the drunkest person in any given room at any given time. Um, and she didn't love that because she doesn't drink all that much, like a glass of wine here and there. And but I don't know. I mean, we were in love, and pretty quickly we got engaged to be married, and then we bought a house really quickly, like the house we still live in. And like I felt like, oh, I made it, I did it. I don't know how I did it, but I did it. I made it. So I felt like I should be celebrating. This is how like your alcoholic brain talks to you. It says you did it. You did great. Why don't you do the thing that almost made you not do it? Like celebrate. Have fun.
Yeah,
Have a little fun with
yeah.
it. Get crazy. Get weird. So I started just drinking all the time, and I eventually got on anti-anxiety medication, which has been great long term, but it's not a good idea to mix Zoloft and vodka.
No, I don't
That's
imagine it would be.
a hot tip. I got super manic and very annoying and impossible to live with. And we got married in the midst of all this. Like the day before, like 3 days before our wedding, I fell down our stairs. Like just full on fell down the stairs. Um, that was bad. Yeah. Yeah. I had told her that I was going to prove that I could drink normal. And that night I got so drunk that I fell down the stairs. So that was bad.
So did you have like cuts and bruises on your face at your wedding?
I had bruises on my body, but nothing on my face, luckily.
That's lucky. That's lucky.
Yeah. So after we were married, she was just so mad at me at that point, rightly so. And I was continuing to drink, and I just kept saying like, "Oh, I'm having fun." Like, why don't you have fun with me? And I said I'm having fun so often that it couldn't have possibly been true, you know? Like, I was just out of control. So yeah, I mean, there were a lot of instances of her catching me drinking when I said I wasn't going to, and just being generally shit-faced and not pleasant to be around. And at some point she said, I'm not crying anymore, and that is a bad sign for you. She said, all that's left is anger right now, so that's not good for you. And that was kind of the point where I was like, if I don't quit right now, all of this is going to go away, and I'm going to have to go back to living the way I was before, which, would have killed me. Basically, it would have been a death sentence. And I wanted to like keep what I had, gotten to. So that is when I quit drinking. That was 7 years ago.
Did you go straight up cold turkey, or was there a process of recovery?
I went cold turkey. I spent a lot of time thinking about in the beginning, like other ways that I could get intoxicated without alcohol, like safe, legal, non-harmful ways. I thought I was positive that must exist, and it does not, obviously. So I tried like kratom. Have you ever tried kratom? Kratom?
No, can't say I have. Never even heard of it.
It's like this. It's related to the coffee bean, but it's a leaf. It looks a lot like pot, and taking it kind of operates on your brain like an opiate. It just makes you kind of pleasantly sleepy. But it's legal and it's easy to get. They have it at like gas stations now in America. It's weird. But I tried that and that didn't work. addicts have to just be sober, or I did anyway. Like, you just can't do anything because everything I do, I'm going to do too much of. It's just the way it goes.
So how did you think you were able to do it? Because like you've essentially just said there's been a flick of the switch. We've just decided, no, I'm not doing it anymore. And that was it. Did you go and see any groups, any therapists, anything like that?
I went to a therapist for a little while. I went to AA eventually, but not for 2 years. And I only went because I had a friend that needed to quit drinking. I just didn't drink. I was, in AA, they would call that a dry drunk, which is just a drunk that isn't drinking. And it almost never works out and is not recommended. I didn't have any like withdrawals because I wasn't drinking every day. I was just going crazy on the weekends. So my body wasn't like expecting, constant intake of booze. So that was fine. I lucked out there. But yeah, I don't know how I did it. Honestly, I hardly remember it. It's all so foggy. Like, it's like the first year that you're sober, it feels like you're just still a drunk, not drinking. And then the second year, you're like, oh, this is what being sober feels like. This is good. And then the third year, you're like, oh, that wasn't at all what being sober is like. Now this is what being sober is like. And then you do that every year. Like, every year I feel more sober.
No, it's fine. And what about the therapist? Did he or she have any impact at all?
No, that was really minor. And no, I don't think that made any difference at all. Honestly. I only saw the therapist like 3 times.
And you said that you've come through the full thing without any scars, like say mental scars. Why or how do you think that is?
Well, okay, I think there are a few reasons. So the first reason is that, this ties into the advice that I would give to anybody that's going to quit drinking is like, you are going to have like a shocking amount of time on your hands. Like, you just have so much more free time when you don't drink, right? Like, don't have hangovers. So you have whole mornings, like you're all clear in the afternoon. You're not drunk at night. So you just have all this time and you have to fill it up.
Yeah.
And I managed to fill it up. I started doing my podcast. I worked on my office. I decided I was going to cover every white space. Like, every wall in my office was going to be covered with like a framed picture.
Right.
Which I did. It is. And so between those two things, I was just constantly busy, or I had something to think about all the time.
That's a good sort of principle for anything, though, even away from alcohol. Like, if you have any issues going on, if you fill your time and you keep your mind occupied, then you're less likely to regress back into a problem behaviour. Yes,
that's absolutely true.
So then what was, that was reason number 1. So moving on to number 2.
Yeah. I think reason number 2 is that I think I had some perspective on it. I mean, I'd been like binge drinking for a solid decade, in that time I had time to ponder what that meant. And, just to think about being a drunk and dealing with being a drunk. So it's not something I hadn't thought about already. I think I had it worked out. I had my wife, which was helpful. And then eventually after a year, she got pregnant. So, if to start drinking again after she got pregnant would make me a monster, like I'd be such a prick, like an unforgivable prick for starting again after that. So that was when I was really like, after a year, she's pregnant. I'm like, it's just over. There's no possible way that I'm ever going to go back. That's when it really clicked.
So what would your number 1 message, or even any list of messages, be to anyone that thinks they've got a problem with alcohol but isn't sure yet or is scared to confirm it for themselves?
If you think you do, you are. If you think you are, you are. If you're thinking about it, normal drinkers don't think about it.
Right.
I would, the other test I always talk about is the little voice inside your head that wants you to keep drinking. If you have to fight with that all the time, like, I'm not going to drink tonight, I'm not going to drink tonight, and then eventually, like, that voice in your head that says, just drink tonight, like, just go, just drink. If you're giving into that, or even having a conversation with some voice in your head, you're definitely an alcoholic. And that voice, when you think about quitting, it'll say like things like, oh, what about weddings? You have to drink at weddings. Like, it's constantly like trying to keep you drinking. That's what it wants. I say it like it's a like thing apart from yourself, but it sort of is. Like, it's a thing that you have to reckon with inside of yourself. So if you have a thing inside of you that you feel like you are kind of negotiating with all the time, that also definitely means that you are an alcoholic. And the other thing I would say is that, like, sobriety is so great. Like, my life is a million times better than it had ever been. Just so much better. And it's better in ways that you can't even like imagine.
It's almost intangible as well. It's hard to measure the ways that it's better. Yeah.
That's exactly right. I feel like a better person. All my relationships got better. I'm a dad, and I'm a good dad. I'm a great dad and a decent husband, I guess I would say. I'm comfortable. It's weird when you're an alcoholic. Life is hard. Like, everything is difficult. Even like the smallest normal stuff is difficult. You have to use like raw animal instinct to like get through your day without like destroying everything. So like, when you like sobriety, it's just like you're shocked by how easy everything becomes all of a sudden. And like, there's a part of me that misses having to be in survival mode all the time. Because that was like, there's something appealing about being in survival mode. You get back to like lizard brain or whatever. So yeah, just life is easy in a way that I couldn't have imagined it being as a drunk.
As you reflect back on times that it wasn't so easy, so you've done really well to get to where you are now. What would you say was the darkest place you ever were in? Is there one situation where you think that was the worst time of my life, that one particular time?
There was a time for a while I would clean up my apartment before I went to bed every time I drank. Because I kind of assumed that one of those times I wasn't going to wake up, and I didn't want my apartment to be embarrassingly gross. So that was pretty dark.
And you would do that. You would do that all the time, like repeatedly.
Yeah, I did it all the time. Yeah, it just became a habit. This is a pretty good habit to wake up to a clean house. It's a nice feeling in the midst of all bad feelings. Yeah. There was one time where I had been drinking at my brother's house, and he, I don't think he acknowledges that he's an alcoholic, but I think we are similar. And so I would just drink, like, I drank in front of him like I didn't in front of most people. And I woke up in the morning and was like, all right, I got to go home so I can start drinking again. And I went into my car, and like my blood sugar just dropped. Like,
are you diabetic? So would you measure that all the time?
No, I'm not diabetic, but I am certain that that's how diabetics feel.
Right.
Is how I felt in that moment. Like, felt like woozy, like I was going to pass out or vomit, and I was sweating like crazy. And I was like, I just like sugar. I need to get sugar in my body. So I drove to like a Walmart and went into this Walmart covered in sweat and reeking of booze. And you don't have Walmarts there, right? You don't.
No, we don't have Walmart, but there's the same company owns a chain called Asda here, so I know what you're talking about. It's like a big supermarket. Or a big,
yeah, right. But I don't know how it is there, but in America, it's the people that shop at Walmart are notoriously embarrassing, I guess. they're poor people, right?
Right.
So like
Okay.
there's a lot of crazy people that shop there. Not that being poor is embarrassing. It's obviously not, but these people are poor because they can't handle themselves. Some people is what I'm trying to say. And I was definitely the worse off than anybody else in this Walmart, which is a bad sign. If you can identify that you're the most fucked up person in any given Walmart, you also have a problem. So I like stumbled in there covered in sweat, like feeling like I was going to pass out. And I just bought this massive bag of popsicles, just a huge bag of popsicles, paid for it. And then like went to my car and laid down in my back seat and like was just eating popsicles and fell asleep. I fell asleep like with popsicles all over me. And I think looking back, that might be a low point. That was pretty bad.
So see, did you, is driving drunk, like the DUI thing, is that common practice?
I mean, obviously it's illegal. I did get one DUI during all that time. It was it was actually a night where I thought I was okay. But I wasn't, obviously. Yeah, it's illegal, but a lot of people drink and drive in North Dakota. It's a problem for sure.
Moving on to the podcast then, the opening up about the alcoholism.
Yeah.
What problems do you think the opening up about it are going to lead within your friends and family?
Yeah, so I wrote and recorded a podcast episode about there's one called Alcoholism and one called Sobriety. And I lay it all out. I don't have, I'm an open book. I don't have anything to hide. So I'm recklessly honest in it, I would say. And I just tell everything, and I probably tell too many things that are going to make people uncomfortable for sure. And it would make things that would make anybody uncomfortable, but things that will for sure make my family super uncomfortable. I've told my mother that she is not allowed to listen to it, but I think she will. Yeah, it's just so it reveals so many things that people didn't know were going on at that point.
And is that about you or about them, so to speak?
It's about me. I really try not to tell other people's stories if I can help it. Where I draw the line between their story and my story. I would probably have disagreements with some people about that, but I try not to tell other people's stories. But I just think the people I know will be shocked about how bad it really was. And there are going to be conversations to be had.
Were they not aware, do you think, of how bad things really were? And this is going to be what reveals them all?
Yeah, I don't think they knew. People were surprised when I said I was going to quit drinking. Like I was surprised they were surprised. I was like, was I really pulling it off like that well, that you didn't think that I had a terrible problem and needed to quit? But I guess they didn't.
But is the thing not there that people were only with you for so long at a time that they might only see you at the weekend, and if you're only drinking at the weekend, they might not know that you were drinking. I know you weren't, but just for example, people can only go by their anecdotal evidence of being around you. Right.
And also, all of them were drinking when they were with me. I've got other friends that have had to quit drinking. So there was always somebody that seemed a little worse off than me, I guess.
You've flown below the radar because you're not quite bad enough to stick out.
Right. And I, stayed, I guess, sort of charming enough as a drunk. Drunks can talk and alcoholics tend to have a fairly charming streak.
And you've managed to maintain your work and stuff. You never lost a job. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think people that I know are going to be very surprised about a lot of it.
And then if they have a problem with it, or we say when they have an issue with it, is the onus going to be on them or you to address that?
I mean, if anybody wants to talk about it, I'll talk about it. I am fully willing to. I think one of the most important things to being a sober person is to talk about being an alcoholic. I think that's really important. And alcoholics don't shut up about being alcoholics, but there's a reason. It's because you constantly like reaffirming that you're sober, and it's something to be proud of. It is. It's hard. It's a hard thing to do, to quit drinking, and a lot of people can't and don't do it. So yeah, I'm not going to start any conversations, but if people want to talk about it, I'll talk about it.
Excellent. So moving on to the present day. So in your own words, how would you describe your current life situation?
Stable. I've got 2 kids, a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. We live in a house that we're going to live in for the rest of our lives, probably. In a city that I've lived in forever. I've got a job that I've had for a decade now that I managed to keep even when I was drinking, so I'm not really worried about losing it. Life is good. It's just good and steady and nice.
What do you do for work? You don't have to say specifically where, but
it's just a desk job. Nothing exciting.
And with you, your partner, and your children, what do you all like to do as a family in normal, non-pandemic times?
Yeah, right. It's been tricky. Pandemic with a kid in a North Dakota winter, it gets insanely cold here. Insanely cold. 30 below-ish. Fahrenheit.
It's the Midwest.
Yeah. And we're the most Midwest of the Midwest. I think we're probably the coldest of all of the Midwestern states. So you can't go outside, so you just have to figure out what to do in like your house. So I don't know, we read a lot of books and watch movies and play games, do puzzles, just normal family stuff, I guess. My kids are awesome. My 5-year-old is really weird and smart. And we get along very, very well. So that's nice.
How would you describe life in Fargo?
I think it's mostly just like anywhere else. I always say that North Dakota didn't get the 70s until the 80s, and we didn't get the 80s until the 90s. But then like the internet caught us up quite a bit. I think since the internet has been so pervasive that like life is kind of the same everywhere. Everywhere you go, it's just like there are minor differences.
Yeah.
But it's essentially the same. People are the same everywhere. It's just like anywhere else.
And is the North Dakota, the restrictions in North Dakota, are they quite lax, or are they strict compared to other places in America, would you say?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I think we've been pretty lax. We're a very Republican state, unfortunately. And nobody here took it seriously because they're all a bunch of like farmers that are like lunatics about their perceived freedoms.
I like boxing, and I seen that there's a fight with Canelo and Billy Joe Saunders that's going to be in Texas, and apparently there's no restrictions anymore, so they can fill up a stadium, 100,000 people, whereas in other places there's no crowds. Where do you draw the line? Why is there no middle ground?
It's insane. I mean, it's just crazy. Texas is an extreme example because they are very much on their freedom trip, the kind of the ugly American freedom trip, where it's like they don't exactly understand what freedom even means. Like there's so many like things that are burdensome in their lives that don't have to be, but are liberal causes, so they think they're bad. Healthcare and such. Texas is an extreme example, but we haven't I feel like my life hardly changed at all, honestly. I hardly noticed it happen. There were times where I was like, I wish I could hang out with my friends. But I never, I have 2 kids. I didn't hang out with my friends all that much to begin with. So we were all
anyway,
already going to be at home.
Looking ahead to the future, do you see yourself at any risk of relapsing, or are you fairly confident that everything's in place that you're not going to?
Well, here's the thing that I think gets people. They become confident that they're not going to drink again, and I'm very confident that I'm not going to drink again. But they forget about other things. Like there are other things that could get you, and you have to be vigilant. I feel like all of like the popular musicians or like famous adult males that are alcoholics and get sober and then end up killing themselves 20 years later. This is just a theory, but all of them end up getting hooked on pain pills at some point because pain pills are so addictive. It's essentially legal heroin, you know? And then when the pain pills get too expensive, then they switch to actual heroin. And then that's all gets to be too much. And they think like, I can't go through getting sober from another thing. I just can't do it again. And then suicide becomes the easy option. I think that's what happens in like, you know, to like a Chris Cornell or a Robin Williams or any of those dudes that end up killing themselves. I think that's ultimately the reason. So I will not ever drink again. I don't think I'll fall into that trap because I'm aware of it. So I think I'm good for the most part, but it's best not to be too confident.
What do you feel like you've got in place to stop that? So where does any confidence you have come from? Like what's that based on?
Is that I know that I can't do anything that changes my brain. Caffeine is about the strongest I can get. There was a night where I had a really bad cold and I was like, oh, I'll take some NyQuil for this cold, you know, because that's what it's for. So I poured myself a cup of NyQuil and I took it. And then I was like, well, I should take two tools better than one. And I took another one and I'm like, oh shit. I'm being an addict right now. This is like addict shit. And I have to shut it down. So I had to dump out a whole bottle of NyQuil because I couldn't fucking handle it because of my dumb addict brain. So, you know, I've seen like how little wiggle room there is. There just isn't any. So I don't do anything that would.
So it's just that it's a strong understanding of the parameters within which you exist.
Right. That if I like break my leg and some doctor tries to give me like Oxycontin, I'm gotta say no.
That's a no-no.
Keep that away from me.
Where do you see yourself and your family in 5 to 10 years' time? Any different from now?
No, I think we're right here. Just older. I'm just so content with life right now. It's just good. It's all around good. I can't like complain about anything. I should be dead or homeless or something, you know, like I think a lot about how the apartment I lived in has a lot of homeless people around it. And, you know, I realized even then that I was one bad screw up away from being one of those people.
It's like a constant reminder, keeps you humble and engaged.
Yeah. There's definitely another timeline where I am just a drunken street bum. And I'm so far from that right now. It's insane. I've got a full middle class kind of life, want for nothing. So life is just so good. I hopefully it doesn't change too much.
Do you want to tell people where they can listen to your podcast?
Yeah, my podcast is called The Irrationally Exuberant. It is scripted, kind of absurdist. This is what it typically is. Scripted absurdist takes on like history and pop culture. Sometimes there are songs. It's comedy. This season upcoming of the show is a lot more personal than past seasons have been. So there's the alcoholism sobriety thing, and then there's a few other stories from my life, but there's also a lot of goofy, ridiculous stuff. Like my depression, materializing as a 5-year-old boy and having a conversation with my own depression. Weird stuff like that. So, I think it's going to be good. It's going to get pretty dark, but it's going to be good. This upcoming quote unquote season. You can listen to it wherever you get podcasts. The irrationallyexuberant.com. On Twitter, I'm exuberantpod. And that pretty much covers it.
What about Instagram? Do you have an Instagram?
Irrationally Exuberant Podcast.
Great. Thanks for your time then. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, that was fun. Well, I don't know if fun is the word, but that was good. It was as fun as talking about personal traumas can possibly be.
Very true. Very true. But thank you so much. See you later on.
Yeah, later. Bye.
So there you have it. An incredible life story with deep lows and remarkable highs from Reid Messerschmidt. Big thanks to Reid for his time. I am incredibly appreciative. Reid can be found on Instagram at Irrationally Exuberant Podcast, which I have included in the show notes. I suggest you get over and have a listen because it is really interesting. You can support the Lost for Words podcast by following us on Twitter and Instagram at Lost for Words Pod, as well as subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. Additionally, if you are an Apple Podcasts user, even a 5-star review on there is the best way for the podcast to continue to grow. Just to finish off, a massive thanks to every single one of you who have taken the time out of your day to listen to this podcast. I am your host Jason, and I will see you next week for episode 9 of the Lost for Words podcast.